Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Markiplier theory. And before we dig into Actor Mark and his connection towards the other Markiplier projects, I first want to begin this video by saying thank y'all. This is the first Markiplier theory of 2023, and thank y'all for making last year awesome. We kicked off the Markiplier theory series last April, and since then we've done over 50 of these videos. Now on one hand you could call that milking this franchise, but on the other hand, you guys like to see it, so I'm just providing for y'all. But anyways, enough real talk, let's get into why y'all really clicked on this video, Markiplier. More specifically, Actor Mark. Because over time, as we began to talk more and more about the timeline specifically in the Markiplier lore, I began to realize an overwhelming problem that seemed to be largely unanswered by the community. And that question quite simply is, who is Actor Mark? And more specifically, like, what kind of characters has Actor Mark played? Has Actor Mark played Engineer Mark? Is Actor Mark really Heist Markiplier? Is he really Date Markiplier? Or perhaps he's not any of them? I know that question sounds dumb, but take a second to think about it. In one of the endings of A Date with Markiplier, we do see Actor Mark come out of character and get to see the behind the scenes of A Date with Markiplier. But based off of the implications of the blue crystal, is Actor Mark really Date Markiplier in all the other videos as well? And if A Heist with Markiplier is supposed to come right before A Date with Markiplier, then does that mean Heist Markiplier is also Actor Mark? Well, the answer is honestly yes and no at the same time. And just like many other reveals about the Markiplier lore, it's all because of the blue crystal. So usually whenever I mention the Markiplier timeline in these Markiplier theories, I'm talking about one specific timeline. That timeline being the one that includes Who Killed Markiplier, Wilford Motherloving Morphstache, Damien, A Heist with Markiplier, A Date with Markiplier, and many other smaller Markiplier ego-themed projects, but not including In Space with Markiplier. In Space with Markiplier is its own separate timeline that's different from the Markiplier lore timeline. How do we know this, you may ask? Well, that's because in Space with Markiplier, the Captain and Engineer Mark use the blue crystal to go from timeline to timeline, hence why they go from their normal sci-fi timeline to suddenly a black and white detective timeline to an almost more action-y movie-like timeline in just the matter of a few videos. If you're still not convinced, then I really recommend watching my past Markiplier theories where I go more in depth in this, but for this video, let's not try to get too off track. But anyways, the way the blue crystal does this is by the power of YouTube end cards. I believe anytime you're playing In Space with Markiplier, A Heist with Markiplier, or even A Date with Markiplier, the end cards that pop up change the timeline that you're currently going through and can set you through a somewhat different timeline where all your past decisions up until that very moment were the exact same the entire time. Kind of like in real life if you think about it deep enough. But that means that every time you choose an end card, another end card will spark another variant timeline of the Markiplier lore timeline, based off of the option that you didn't choose and the set of options that would have came after the non-chosen option. So Neo, you may ask, if there's lots of variants of the Markiplier lore timeline, then which one is technically the canon Markiplier lore? Which end cards and endings will lead us through the path of the official Markiplier lore timeline, as I like to call it in all of my Markiplier theories? And to solve this, you may think that we need to choose the endings that will lead us to the next video that's meant to be in the timeline of the Markiplier lore. However, for some of these projects, this isn't actually the case. Like with A Heist with Markiplier, I believe there is multiple endings that take place in the same timeline. These two endings being endings 30 and 31, since they both feature you, the protagonist, restarting from the beginning of the heist all over again, almost like a time loop. I think that for the official Markiplier lore timeline, and only that timeline, we will have endings 30, then ending 31, and then after that, the ending that will be next, where it fully stops the loop, and actually has you continue on with A Date with Markiplier will be the zombie apocalypse ending where you teamed up with the crazy scientist lady to stop the anomaly, whatever you're supposed to call it, the blue crystal, pretty much. The reason I believe that this is the final ending for A Heist with Markiplier that takes place in the Markiplier lore timeline is because of the final sentence that Heist Markiplier asks you in that ending.
You, want to go on that date?
I believe that those words is what sets up A Date with Markiplier. So now with the Heist with Markiplier out of the way, which end cards and which ending in A Date with Markiplier is the one that officially goes in the Markiplier lore timeline? Because remember, they're still all canon, they're just all their own separate timeline in the Markiplier multiverse. Well, unfortunately, with how late A Date with Markiplier is into the Markiplier lore timeline, I don't think we can yet tell which ending is canon. I think first Markiplier needs to make a brand new project that actually takes place after the events of A Date with Markiplier. Then we might be able to tell from there which ending is the canon ending. And right now, whenever I'm saying canon ending, I don't mean that like which ending is the actual real ending and which one of them don't even matter to the lore, because like actually they are all technically canon. I just want to make this part very clear, like they're all technically canon, they're just all canon in their own separate timelines. And whenever I'm asking which ending or which choices is canon, I'm mainly talking about which one is canon to the timeline that we're building at the moment. So finally, with all that out of the way, if you're still understanding and you're not completely lost in the idea of a Markiplier multiverse, you might be wondering, so what? Why does all this explanation, what does it have to do with Actor Mark and other characters he could possibly be playing as? Well, going off of what we've been talking about throughout this video, Actor Mark is and isn't all these other Markiplier characters all at the same time. There is one timeline where he is Engineer Mark and another timeline where he's not. There's one timeline where he is Heist Markiplier and one timeline where he's not. And because there's infinite timelines, infinite choices, and infinite possibilities, then if you really want to answer the question on if Actor Mark is any of these characters, you have to specify that question down to what timeline. What Actor Mark in what timeline? What variation of Actor Mark? Based off of Actor Mark's cameo in Space with Markiplier, we can tell that there is a timeline where Actor Mark is playing as Engineer Mark. However, that timeline is also separate from the timeline where the rest of the events of In Space with Markiplier take place, so even though Engineer Mark and Actor Mark might have been the same person in that one Easter egg, it was only that Easter egg or only that scene where they were the same person, only that single universe or timeline. Since In Space with Markiplier has both the Captain and Engineer Mark hopping through different timelines and going through different timelines, usually throughout the rest of the timelines that they go into, Engineer Mark is his own person and isn't just acted out by Actor Mark. And the same exact logic is applied to A Heist with Markiplier and A Date with Markiplier, where whether or not Actor Mark is Heist Markiplier or Actor Mark is Date Markiplier really depends on which end cards you end up choosing. Where ending 1 out of 10, aka the meta ending in A Date with Markiplier, that one outright confirms that this whole time, Date Markiplier is just another character that Actor Mark has to act as, which also makes Heist Markiplier another character that Actor Mark has to act as, since for Date Markiplier to even exist, Date Markiplier and Heist Markiplier have to be the same person, based off of Heist Markiplier's lines at the end of A Heist with Markiplier. However, this is only one of many timelines where Actor Mark is playing these two characters. There are many other end cards and many of other choices throughout A Heist with Markiplier and A Date with Markiplier that have no relation towards Actor Mark, therefore making me believe that those other timelines just aren't even about Actor Mark. Like, Actor Mark could be a character in those timelines, however, he's not playing as Heist Markiplier or Date Markiplier. So even though there may only be one timeline that we know about so far where Actor Mark is playing Heist Markiplier and Date Markiplier and also technically Engineer Mark, I do think that in every timeline where a date with Markiplier exists, I believe Date Markiplier is the same person as a Heist Markiplier. But pretty much the TLDR of all of this is that because of the blue crystal, Actor Mark is playing Engineer Mark, Heist Mark, and even Date Markiplier in probably like 1 or 2 timelines. However, there are still many other choices that spark many other timelines that have no relation towards Actor Mark, and Actor Mark does not play any of these other characters and egos. Yet with all these revelations, there's still one question that we technically can't solve yet. In the Markiplier lore timeline specifically, is Actor Mark playing Heist Markiplier, Date Markiplier, and or Engineer Markiplier? And the reason we can't answer that question yet is because there isn't a Markiplier project that takes place after the events of A Date with Markiplier that tells us which ending is canon in A Date with Markiplier. So until we end up finding out which ending is the one that takes place in the Markiplier lore timeline for A Date with Markiplier, there is a 1 out of 10 chance that Actor Mark is playing these other egos in the Markiplier lore timeline, the main timeline that we mainly focus on whenever it comes to these big Markiplier projects. And the reason I say 1 out of 10 specifically is because only 1 out of 10 of the endings in A Date with Markiplier is the one where Actor Mark seems to be playing as these other egos. So with that said, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did enjoy, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.